Hi everyone. I am making a video about my experience through the divorce in my unique situation, which it's kind of a surreal experience now that I look at it, and what I disclose sometimes can be under the cloud of judgment by some people who you'll hear when I explain it, you'll understand. So I was in the military and I went through a few things, and then I ended up being engaged, or sorry, being falling in love with this soldier, and he went away, and then there was a snafu, and then I rebounded, and I was with someone else. So I was with two people within the course of a month after it just I can't really say. I'm not going to go into details because it would take an hour and a half to explain it. But anyways, so I ended up within a month and a half finding out I'm pregnant, and neither guy was in the position. One guy was just, he was on a flight mission doing, it's just, he was not ready to be a dad. And the next guy had already met someone else, and so on and so forth. So they broke, we just, decided to keep the peace. And then I had met someone else who said, I'll sign the birth certificate and we will get married as long as you let both of those guys go. And it was discussed. We all talked about it, and that was the decision we made. So I ended up getting married to the third guy, and he signed. We got married a month before February. Well, we got married in February. She was born in April. He signed the birth certificate. He became her dad. That's just the way it was. So then um, we ended up having another daughter together, and so they were 18 months apart, and everything worked out. And like I said before, I was in an abusive relationship, and it was very scary. And then when I decided to become separated, I'll tell you what happened when it came to our children. He had been abusive. He did not want the divorce. And so I filed, and he moved out, and I kept the marital home. There was not a lot of equity. There was only like $3,000 equity. So we didn't have a lot of equity in the house, and that's just the way it was. And so initially he would say, I'm only going to watch the girls when you work. So he'd come over after the girls got out of school and then watch them until right before I came home from work, he'd leave. Because I'd always call the girls and say I'm heading home, and then he would take off. And for the first 8 months, I have to reiterate, I made a video before this, but for the first 8 months, he would only watch them and babysit for them when I worked. Never at night, never on the weekends, never outside of those parameters. And so after 8 months, I said to my lawyer, I need him to be a part of their lives every other weekend. That's, whatever. So that was stipulated, so that was enforced. And I just disclosed, we all knew that my then husband, was not my oldest daughter's biological father. In fact, he told me before he signed the birth certificate, he says, I'll be her dad and sign the birth certificate, but you are not allowed to find out her paternity. And I said, okay. And so I just remember I'd have dreams about who it was, and it was either or. So my lawyer gives me a call. We had been separated for a while, and he says, your soon-to-be ex-husband does not want to pay child support for your oldest daughter because he is not her biological father. And I was like, oh my gosh. And because she had been born Fort Lewis, Washington, and I didn't know the laws in Wisconsin, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So the lawyer says you have to find her biological father. But the issue is my ex-husband and I, not the issue, but we had discussed when she was born that when she was old enough, we would let her know about her paternity. Then she would be allowed, she would be allowed to go do paternity and find out which man was her biological father. So here we are. She's 9.5 years old, and my ex-husband has thrown this at me and put a kink in the whole thing. And here I am explaining to my daughter at the age of 9.5. she already knew the parameters or the basic idea of sex. So here I am with this 9.5-year-old telling her, this is what I did, and there's a possibility, that you have a biological father, but we'll have to test two people. And I'm pretty sure I know, but that's just the way it is. So the lawyer said he doesn't want to pay. We're going to have to find her biological father for child support. And I'm like, oh my God. So anyways, so went through way back when. This is way back when in 1990. And no, wait a minute. This was the year 2000. And so I had to look in the yellow pages or whatever, and I found the second guy. And I called him up, and he's already married with 3 children. And I said, Jay, his name isn't Jay, but I'll just use first initial. I said, this is Lori. He remembered, of course, who I was. And I said, I'm just calling, and I need you to sit down. I said, I have to, I'm getting a divorce, and I need to come and see you. We need to do paternity so we can rule you out, and we can go, I can go, paternity test the second guy who I still had to find. And Jay said, okay, no problem. So Jay and I and his wife and his children, we started communicating, and he did the test. He had to drive down from Manitowoc, and I drove from Milwaukee to go do the test. And we started to communicate and talk, and everything was fine between him, his wife, and their children. And come to find out, he was her biological father. So at the age of 10, my daughter met her dad, her step-siblings, and his wife, and this and that. So that's another story. So went through all of that because my ex-husband forced my hand. And then my ex-husband decides that instead of paying $25,000 for 2, he'll pay 17% for our daughter together, 3% for our oldest, so he's going to do 20%, and then he was going to carry them both on his health insurance. After all said and done. So my daughter went through all of that, and he never really came to see him. He was supposed to see them every other weekend, and that started working out, but as I mentioned before, he ended up working a 3rd shift, and he was with his then fiance / soon to be wife, or I kind of forget the days this happened, but he ended up saying, we went through the trial, and we didn't argue about the kids. They were going to primarily live with me, but it was kind of going to be an open schedule where he would come whenever. And so we didn't even have anything stipulated about our children. But after we got divorced, I messaged him and I said, okay, what time are you coming on Friday or this weekend? And he said, I'm only coming the 3rd weekend of the month because that's when it's stipulated in our divorce decree. And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, I only have to see them the 3rd weekend in the month, and that's when I'm coming. And I'm like, oh my gosh. What? Like, oh my gosh. So anyways, I'm like, whoa. Couldn't believe it. Could not believe it. So I first was very sad for my children, but then I'm like, I get more time with them. That's cool. And the less they were with their dad, the less he could influence them or undo what I was doing in our home regarding discipline and all of that stuff that comes along with raising kids. So initially it was just so sad for my kids because we had good kids. They were great kids. They were kind, and they were respectful, and they were good, and they were good students, and they had a good foundation as human beings of how you should treat other people. They really did. And so I don't understand why he chose to see them one Saturday a month, which was the 3rd Saturday of the month. And that was it. So we went through all of that, and Thursday, whatever. Of course, I said, when the age of 18, my oldest daughter left, and then my youngest daughter, 19, she went to stay with her dad and left as well. And I can just say that when you're dealing with an abuser and you love your children, your abuser, when they can't get a hold of you and no longer live with you and no longer have access to you, like physically, the way they attack you is mentally and emotionally by hurting your children. And that's the way it is. And unfortunately, there's nothing you can do to change your ex. It doesn't matter if you had $1 million, they still would abuse your children. And that's all there is to it. I had a thought and it just escaped. So, they abuse your children, disconnect from them, and then when the kids are old enough and child support's done, they come back around. And then they will use their money, even if there's a little bit, to manipulate and control your children. And then when your children, go on to get married and have children, and they are in a relationship with your ex, despite what your ex has done, they continue to attempt to get to you through those situations because they're a part of it and you're not. So that's just the way it is. But that's what I wanted to talk about, is that the best thing you can do is when you have your children, enjoy them. Avoid talking about your ex. Don't play into his games. It's really hard, and it takes a lot of practice and a lot of self-control. But the best thing you can do is join groups. There's a lot of groups on Facebook. It's the Alienated Parent Facebook group, and you'll see a lot of people who are living the same life that you're living. And the best thing you can do is reestablish your life. Find joy in your everyday life and build up your strength, and do not allow your ex to get under your skin. And it's very, very hard, and it takes a lot of self-control. And I'm not saying it's easy, because it's not, but just know that this is life, and that's the way it is. And I would not ever say I regret having children, but all I know is, had I chosen, had I been healthier, I would have chosen someone who would have never abused me and abused my children. So that's all I wanted to talk about. That's all I know. And I hope whomever is watching this, if you're in this situation, know that one day you will find some sort of respite from your storm. It may happen a little bit at a time, and eventually when your children are grown and raised and they're off on their own, the sooner you can build a wall between you and your ex, the less likely they will be allowed to continue to abuse you after the children are gone. So that's all I know. I hope this helps. I've been through the ringer and back, and I've been on the dark side, and now I'm in the light, and I'm just telling you, it's so much better over here. It really is. So that's all I want to talk about, and I hope everyone is having a great day. Bye-bye.